Now, according to Nigeria's Vice President Namadi Sambo, the government will hand over power assets to preferred bidders today. Now, CNBC's Africa's Ibrahim caught up with Andrew Ali, President of African Finance Corporation, on the international lenders financing of Nigeria's power sector. Take a look.
The Nigerian banks have made a major commitment under the Power and Aviation Intervention Fund, where they've funded about 110 billion nairas worth of projects. It should be borne in mind that although the interest rates are subsidized by the central bank, it's actually the banks themselves that are taking the underlying credit risks on these projects. So that is already a huge commitment, something in the order of about $600–700 million. Then, in terms of the power privatization that has just occurred, the majority of the financing came from the Nigerian banks. I don't have a specific figure, but certainly most of the money that was used to pay for these assets came from within Nigeria, and a substantial portion of that was bank financing.
We've seen a lot of commitments in terms of financing Nigeria's power sector from the country's banks and all the financial institutions. Now, what else should we expect after the whole, privatization process?
Well, the next stage, which is actually bigger than the privatization process, is the investment in upgrading and expanding and developing the assets. Many of these assets have not been maintained properly for many years. And certainly the projects that the AFC, where I work, has been involved in financing, we fully expect that the rehabilitation expenditure will actually be much larger than the acquisition costs. So we see a very large potential for financing in this area. There are also a number of greenfield projects which are coming up, both in terms of power generation, but also, as was mentioned at today's presentation, in terms of transmission as well. These all require huge sums of investment. So I expect that as long as the government and the regulators continue to ensure that the environment is conducive to investment, you continue to see commitments and actually expanding commitments from the Nigerian banks.
Now, in as much as we've seen investments and commitment from the banks and, financial institutions in the country towards the power sector, have you actually thought about, the challenges that comes with this?
Well, there are a number of challenges. First of all, the reforms, even though I think we all find them to be very good, are still somewhat nascent. So, in short, there's no track record. So that track record needs to be developed. There are many things that also need to be done or continue to be done. Firstly, it's very important that the regulators ensure that the tariffs remain cost recovery tariffs. If the tariffs are too low and in effect the system is losing money, then it's not going to grow. Secondly, transmission is vitally important. Today, the transmission network can barely cope with the amount of generation that is occurring. We fully expect that generation will increase as the people who've done the privatization invest in those assets. We need to make sure that the transmission is there to actually transmit the electricity to where it will be consumed. So I'm very pleased to hear the initiatives that the Nigerian Vice President announced in terms of investments and development in the grid. I believe he said the goal is to increase the grid's capacity to take it to 10,000 megawatts in a few years' time, and then ultimately to 20,000 megawatts, which will be a vast improvement.